So why did you choose to study climate change and sharing economy? What's so special about these two things?
Many thanks. My interest in climate change started in 2009 when the United Nations Climate Change Conference was held in Copenhagen. In that time, I realized that climate change is damaging our society, and mitigating climate change is very important for our sustainable development. So I would like to make contributions to this field. So I have been researching on climate change in the past 12 years. Sharing economy is a very emerging economic model. It's usually defined as a peer-to-peer based sharing of products or services. I think the sharing economy has a much potential to mitigate climate change, to promote sustainable development, because sharing economy can increase the resources utilization efficiency. So I have been combining the sharing economy and climate change in my research.
Okay. You mentioned that you have studied this for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then during the process of your study and research, what are some of the most interesting or rewarding parts that you find?
Okay, so I would like to introduce my work about carbon inequality. There have been many studies on the carbon inequalities among different countries. For example, the carbon footprint per capita in the US is 3 times of that in the UK. So there are huge gap. My research pays attention to the carbon inequality at individual or household level. So I want to know how different between the of carbon footprint between the different people. So usually, generally speaking, richer people have higher carbon footprint. In China, the top 5 income earners is responsible for about 70% of national carbon footprints, and the bottom 15% of income earners only cause about 25%. So there are huge gap between the different people. So in international climate change negotiation, there is a very important principle named common but differentiated principle, a common but differentiated responsibilities principle. So it means that all countries have shared responsibility in mitigating climate change, but their responsibility is not equal. So I think this principle can also be used in one country. The richer people have higher carbon footprint, so they should pay more responsibility. And so when government making climate actions, they need to consider these policies impacts on different income groups. We need to let richer people to take more responsibilities. Yeah.
You mentioned that the wealthy people tend to have more carbon foot consumption compared to the poor people.
Yeah.
And we have seen a lot of campaigns or information on our social media about trying to raise people's awareness about the importance of climate mitigation and climate change. But what are some of the trends that's happening in terms of climate mitigation that's happening in China now?
Okay, so the campaigns in the social media, I think these campaigns are useful to mitigate climate change, because on the one hand, it can let more people to realize the importance of climate change mitigation, to increase the people's willingness to pay to mitigate climate change. On the other hand, it can put pressure on governments to encourage them to take more actions. Of course, there are also some campaigns in China to promote the climate change mitigation actions. Yeah.
Okay. You talk about the trends of carbon footprint in China, but what are some of the factors or driving reasons behind it that's drive the converging carbon footprint in China?
Okay, so when I talk about the converging carbon footprints, I mean the carbon inequality is declining in China. So as I mentioned before, there are large gap in carbon footprint among different income groups. So in the past 10 years, the carbon inequality has been declining. We developed a carbon footprint Gini coefficient to measure the inequality. You might know the Gini coefficient.
For income.
Yes, it's an indicator to show the income inequality. So I use this concept to develop a Gini coefficient for carbon footprints. So our results show that the carbon footprint Gini coefficient has declined largely in the past decade in China. So this is mainly caused about two issues. First is the first is the greener lifestyle. So it means that people prefer the greener and low carbon lifestyle. The second is the declining gap between the consumption in China.
Okay, I see. For all these factors that you just mentioned before, our Chinese government have any policies that they potentially could do, or they have already proceed to promote these factors into a better way?
Yes, Chinese government has been working hard to mitigate and adapt to climate change. There are mainly two ways to mitigate climate change from production perspective. The first one is energy structure change. The second one is the energy efficiency improvement. So the carbon emissions are mainly from fossil energy, the coal, the oil, the natural gas. Unfortunately, our world still depends on fossil energy in our energy supply. So the first way to mitigate climate change is to shift fossil energy to renewable energy, the hydro power, the wind power, solar power. China is now has the largest installed capacity in renewable energy, in hydropower, in wind power, in solar power. So China has been promoting the development of renewable energy. The second way is to increase the energy efficiency. So it means that we need to reduce the carbon intensity. It means the carbon emissions per unit of GDP. From 2005 to 2012, China's carbon intensity declined by about 15%. It means that if we use 100 kg CO2 to produce a product in 2005, now we only need 50 kg CO2 to produce the same products. So these are the two mainly ways to mitigate climate change. Yeah.
So are those mainly from the production side? Like you mentioned the structural change and the structural transition. What are some of the changes that happen in the consumption side? For example, like the people try to have a healthier lifestyle, a greener, healthy lifestyle. What are some of the factors from the consumption side?
Yeah, very good question. So energy structure change and energy efficiency improvement are all from production perspective. If we look at this question from consumption perspective, we will have new solutions for mitigating climate change. So in the past 20 years, a good thing is that increasing people are aware that climate change is a serious issue, and they would like to take actions to mitigate climate change. More people prefer the greener and lower carbon lifestyle. So for example, we can take the public transportation rather than driving a car. We can buy an electronic car rather than the car using the oil. And one of the most important issues is that consumers, we need to know that almost all consumption will induce carbon emissions. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the phone we use, they are all carbon emissions in producing these products. So we need to take our action to a low carbon lifestyle. We should waste the food. We should take our action to buy the products which have the lower carbon emissions. So the changes in lifestyle will make a large contribution to climate change mitigation.
So apart from like all the factors from the production and consumption side, like transition of industries and then the change of lifestyles, what about like the structural change of the economy, like the sharing economy concept? You are the expert of this field. Is sharing economy an effective way to promote sustainability, and what is its relationship with climate change?
Yes, sharing economy has a much potential to promote urban sustainability and mitigate climate change. Sharing economy is a peer-to-peer based sharing of excess of goods or services. So it means that sharing economy can increase the utilization efficiency of products. So it can help us to reduce the usage of resources. So many studies have proved that sharing economy have environmental benefits. In my own research, I have estimated the environmental impacts of bike sharing. So we have estimated the bike sharing programs in Shanghai, in New York, in Washington, D.C. So our results show that the bike sharing can help us to reduce the energy use, the carbon dioxide emissions, the air pollution emissions in the transportation sector. So sharing economy has a much potential to reduce carbon emissions. So I think in the future we can rely more on sharing economy in mitigating climate change.
Which one do you think plays a bigger role, like the factors from the production side, from the consumption side, and the role of the sharing economy concept? Which one you think that now has played a bigger role, or in the future could potentially have more impact to the climate change mitigation?
It's hard to say which part has the bigger role. I think in mitigating climate change, government should play a critical role. For enterprises, they have the motivation to make profits. So reducing carbon emissions usually means higher cost for a company. So the governments need to make policies, need to provide incentives for low carbon production. In addition, the government from the different countries need to cooperate on climate change mitigation. It is very difficult to get a global agreement on climate change because of the externalities of climate change action. So when one country takes actions to mitigate climate change, the benefits are not only enjoyed by that country, and it is shared by all the people in all countries. So all the government have the motivation to let other countries to take more responsibility. They can be the free riders. So if we want to mitigate climate change effectively, the government from all countries need to cooperate, to work together to get a global agreement.
So with this trend of climate change that's now happening globally, specifically to China, what are some of the industries that you think would be negatively affected, and what are some of the industries that will be promoted because of this transition to trying to get climate mitigation into practice?
Yes, good question. So if we want to mitigate climate change, so we need to transform our economy. So generally speaking, the industries using fossil energy will be negatively impacted. For example, the energy sector, the heavy manufacturing sectors. So these factors are usually energy intensive and higher carbon intensive. With these sectors will be negatively impacted. by comparisons, some emerging industries such as the new energy, the new materials, these industries will be beneficial from this low carbon transition because these new industries will make contributions to climate change mitigation.
And I think you just mentioned so the renewable energy and the new energy sectors will be promoted because of this. What does that mean for people and students who are still either undergraduate or graduate, or for people who just start their career? Can you give us some of the insights and suggestions that you may have?
Yeah, okay. So, in the next 50 or 40 years, climate change mitigation will be one of the most important issues for the world as well as for China. So, China aims to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. So the undergraduate students are usually 20 years old. So 40 years ago, in 2060, you will be about 60 years old. So it means that you will see the achievement of carbon neutrality targets of China, and you will also be the main contributor to this target. So for the undergraduate students, if you want to make contributions to climate change mitigation, so you can select some jobs which are highly related to climate change. For example, the renewable energy sector, the new material sector, and the electric car sectors. So if you can select these jobs, this kind of jobs, it will be beneficial for you as well as for the country. So because you, in these emerging industries, you might get more opportunities in your career. And the government, the world, also need you to take these new jobs to mitigate and adapt to climate change.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this interview.
Thank you very much. Thank you.